Hello, Bakery Con students. Now week 4, hard to believe, but again, these courses move so quickly, so just make sure to continue to stay on top of things, keep up with my Econ Lab, the forum discussion post this week. Again, I'll try to get hold of everybody this week on the forum discussion post, but kind of split it up between week 2 and 3. And really, by the middle of this week, we are halfway done with this course, so just, again, stay on top of that final project too for the common assessment. So this week, you're going to read chapters 11 and 16, dealing a lot with the idea of technology, production, and then continuing the idea with the marginal revenue product of labor and how labor is determined in markets relative to supply and demand, how wages are established, the equilibrium at what shifts the demand curve for labor or the supply curve for labor. So first, just with chapter 11, you're going to go through the concept of the short run versus the long run. The short run, we'll say that you at least have some fixed cost, whether it's an obligation to a lease, a rent. This doesn't necessarily have to be a year. It just means that you're going to have some fixed costs. But in the long run, everything is variable. So managers can make decisions about whether to shut down a particular operation within a company, shut down the entire company, which we hope that does not happen. That's usually what we call bankruptcy. But a lot of times it could just be decisions about, we tried this, but it didn't work, or it didn't meet our opportunity cost of capital. So one of the concepts I want to make sure to stress from this chapter is what you'll read about is especially the technology, but it's the idea of a production function, and it's holding like everything else constant. But if I added one variable, say labor, what's going to happen to total output? And I always like to equate the idea of like a garden. You're trying to maximize the number of vegetables you get out of the garden. You think about all these independent variables that are in that garden, whether it's water, sun, miracle grow, human capital, how we integrate all these things together in a limited time and space. The goal is to use all those things to do it to be both technically efficient, the least amount of inputs. It can vary different ways you do it, but also economically efficient too. But as I continue to add a worker in a production function, you're going to see the shape that there's increases in the productivity of each worker. Then you're going to kind of have this shift where it all almost like kind of like shifts the other direction, keeps going positive, reaches a maximum, and it actually become negative if you kept on adding workers to a limited plant size or space. We start arguing about who's doing what. We don't have space. We're kind of bumping into each other. It can actually become negative. The marginal product can become negative. So we're looking at that concept that there's this diminishing marginal returns that kick in, and this is ultimately why you're going to see these U-shapes of these cost curves. So with those cost curves, this chapter spends a lot of time with that. And the basic definition is that total cost is equal to fixed cost plus variable cost. In the short run, you're going to have some fixed cost, but fixed costs are constant. Say it's like $1,000, it's going to be $1,000 whether you produce 0 units to 1,000 units. A lot of times we look at average fixed cost, which is fixed cost divided by Q. We like to refer to this as the spreading of overhead costs. But I want you to first think of it in terms of total cost equals fixed cost plus variable cost. And then if I look at the average cost, I mentioned very early in this course with the math, you have to know about marginals and averages, but all you're really doing is just taking total cost divided by Q is average total cost, fixed cost divided by Q is average fixed cost, and variable cost divided by Q is average variable cost. And we can plot these cost curves, and that's what a lot of this chapter does, lays down the foundation, because we get into the market structures. We'll kind of look at the demand curves on top of these cost curves and our decision points. But for now, we're just looking at the relationships with these cost curves. So obviously, average total cost is going to be the highest curve on that U shape. And I want you also to think about this average total cost curve includes all your cost plus your implicit or opportunity cost. And that's what the textbook talks about, accounting profit versus, say, an economic profit. So accounting profit says, hey, if my price is exactly equal to average total cost, I'm just kind of breaking even in terms of both my required rate of return and from an accounting perspective. But if I'm not meeting it, I might actually have like an economic loss. It doesn't mean that I'm losing from an accounting perspective. I can still be profitable from that perspective, but if the required rate of return is 10%, we need to kind of at least be there. And we'll go into that more Next week we look at these market structures. So, but you'll have, below that, you'll also have an average variable cost. And again, you'll notice that it very much aligns with that average total cost curve. But the difference between the two is the average fixed cost. And it's going to get closer and closer together, those two curves, ATC and ABC, because average fixed cost, as I produce more, it's getting smaller and smaller. It will never go to zero, but it will just continue to get smaller. So the last concept in that chapter is the idea of the change in total cost. We call that marginal cost. So by definition, marginal cost is simply, I like to refer to as delta as the change in total cost over delta, the change in Q. So I'm interested too that, hey, what happens to my marginal cost each time that I produce another unit of output? So it's essentially what we're looking at there. So all right, with chapter 16, I think you'll find that interesting. Actually, it's Sunday night here on January 22nd, just taking a little break from the Chiefs game. I was up in Wisconsin over the weekend, so I got to hear it from the Green Bay fans and all that when I was visiting my relatives about their woes. So hopefully the Chiefs don't end up being the other top seed that loses tonight, but hopefully by the end of the game night, the Chiefs will be victorious, so we'll see. But thinking about the Chiefs, it's kind of and this chapter goes into like sports figures, about the marginal revenue product of labor. And what you'll be looking at and calculating in this chapter is the idea that if I add another worker, I'll do so as long as, the output they produce times, whatever that price is greater than the additional cost. And what you'll be looking at is that, this marginal revenue product of labor is declining, but let's say they have a fixed wage of $1,000 a week. It's kind of that point where, the additional revenue that this worker generated is just equal to this additional cost. That's kind of our point that we're going to get to that says, hey, I'm not going to add another worker because the additional revenue I get now is going to be less than that additional cost. So you're also going to be looking at shift factors, the market demand curve for labor in this chapter. It can be human capital. They're more productive. They can shift the curve out. Obviously, the product itself, too. If the product is high demand and the price goes up, that can shift out more labor. Technology, make individuals more productive. Changes in the price of producing that good. Quantity of other inputs. And then just simply also, too, the number of firms. So as more firms, more competition, could be more demand for certain types of labor. And with supplying labor in this chapter, a concept you're going to look at is called the substitution and income effect.
So I mentioned very early in this course about thinking like an economist, the idea that you have the choice to consume, choice to work from leisure. Well, if I get individuals that want to, if I pay them a higher wage, what they will probably do is substitute leisure for work. You have to be compensated. Like I actually was stopped at a Quick Trip up there. They'd advertised one of the little signs like $3 extra for working a night shift from 9 until 6 in the morning. So they're paying a premium because it was probably harder to get those individuals to want to work at those times at night. But the idea, somebody might say, well, you know what, I'm willing to substitute not working the daytime if I get a wage premium increase, so I'm willing to work more. So the idea makes sense. Somebody's going to pay you more, you're willing to work more. But the trade-off is that as people make higher incomes, the income effects kicks in, and now because you have more money, you may actually choose to work less. So, but for the most part, we're going to assume that as the wages go up, people are willing to supply more labor. So. Now, some of the things that can shift the market supply curve of labor, it can be change in the population. It could be changing demographics. For example, many more women are entering the workforce right now. Whereas, traditionally many years ago, it might have been that the wife stayed at home and men went to work, but that's changed and for good too. But it can also shift the amount of supply of labor, those that can add value to the workforce. So. And then also going to be, we can look at it changing now alternatives. Again,
how attractive is certain types of workers to the market. This kind of deals with your skill sets again, and what you can do. So you're going to be going over some of those supply and demand curve analysis in the labor market, reviewing some of those. And the textbook's also going to go through some explanation for what I would call wage differentials, whether it be education, experience, in terms of that why someone would be paid more, or preferences for certain types of jobs. So again, if you have any questions, do email me. I really look forward to what you're going to post in the forum discussion this week. But again, keep thinking about that final project. And if you need to reach out to me via email, phone, or if you want to meet one-on-one Zoom, happy to do that. So have a great week, and go Chiefs.